I'm Cara Chen of the Ism Youth Files, a book and podcast project about mental wellness. We're listening to sounds of an evening stroll in India. Kolkata is the capital of West Bengal in India. It was founded as an East India Company trading post until India got independence from British rule in 1911. Kolkata now has a population close to 15 million people. Media rights received an essay from one youth, Adrija Jana, who was struggling with life and death in Kolkata. She responded to the pandemic by becoming a community volunteer.
In all this time, I could not possibly ignore what was happening in the outside world. With more than 300,000 COVID cases in India per day, no number of helping hands could be too many. So I volunteered as a support person and helped hundreds of patients find hospital beds, oxygen cylinders, blood supply, food home delivery, and place newly orphaned children or children with parents hospitalized in temporary child care centers.
Adrija Jana was 17 when she sent her essay to us about how COVID was affecting her extended family.
In the daytime, I managed the household, my studies, and took care of the family. And at night, when everyone was asleep, I took night shifts to help the COVID victims. Then in April, my grandmother was recognized with kidney failure and needed even more extensive care and a stricter diet. I handled everything in addition to the organizations I worked with and working as the student secretary of my school student council. My days often began at 5 a.m. and sometimes ended at 3:30 a.m. Throughout this period, I kept feeling like I would fall into depression. I felt stress, yes, and extremely anxious too. But not for a single moment did I feel like I wanted to do something very drastic. Later, I realized that it was because I did not have the time or even the mindset for it. I knew that I was bottling up a lot in my heart and that I did need to cry. But even if I found 2 minutes to myself, tears would not flow. I was emotionally dead and working on autopilot. I knew that if something happened to me, I would be taking down the entire family of 10 members, so I persevered and I hardened my core. But then there is a limit and end line to everything. My grandmother passed away in the end of July 2021. That was the last straw. That was the push I needed for everything inside me to come pouring out. And the vehicle came to take her away and who did not let go of my grandma one bit. I became hysterical, screaming and shouting at the top of my lungs. My mother and sisters together could not pull me away. As soon as the vehicle left, I fainted on the street itself. I could not sleep all night.
Adrija says funerals for loved ones are usually 11 days long, but because of the pandemic, it was a small ceremony with close relatives. In January 2022, she caught COVID and survived it, but the pressures for students in India compounded the stress she had already experienced. At 17, this was a crucial time for her to take exams that would determine her future.
So in India, we have a system of examination where 2 times in their lives, school students are required to take a nationwide examination, once in grade 10 and once more in grade 12. These are called the board examinations. And during these 2 years, there is extreme pressure on students because it's like the entire pressure or the entire flashlight or the entire spotlight of their school life is on these 2 years itself. And there is a very great pressure on them to perform well. It's like if you don't perform well in your board exams, your entire school life has gone to waste.
Adrija says not everyone survived these tests.
Suicides are very common in students during their board years. When I was in grade 10, one of my batchmates, she took her life. She did not take the grade 10 board exams with us, but then she was someone we did not know.
According to the World Health Organization, suicide is among the top 3 causes of death worldwide. Youth are at the highest risk in 1/3 of developed and developing countries. And in India, suicide is a leading cause of death for young people. For girls, it's more than double the rate it is for boys.
To our surprise, the same thing happened in grade 12. In the month of April, one of my very, very close friends took her life because she could not handle the stress anymore. And she was somebody I was very, very close to. So it was very, very devastating. And then the cause was board stress, and she's an only child. So her parents and family, they are also absolutely devastated. So this is a very common phenomenon. Every year during the board exam, stress rates and suicide rates kind of jump up because of the stress that not everybody can take. Yes, it is a very delicate situation.
Despite her family's hardships and the stresses of the exams, Adrijana continues to volunteer and is civically engaged. She wants to be a writer and become a leader in her community.
I think our generation is much more aware. And even though there are still situations where people are bullying each other or not being empathetic towards each other, but in general, our generation seems to understand more than the previous generations have. It's probably because of the connectivity that we have and the access to information that we have, which our parents did not. So I think if we can keep developing in this way, if we can inculcate these values in the generations that come after us, or from a very young age, from the school level itself, I think the future can be better than the situation is right now. At least then people won't feel pressure to keep everything inside themselves just because of the fear of being called crazy. So I believe if it is a if and but situation, it always is with our generation. If we can keep developing in a good way, in the right direction, then yes, we can have a better future.
Janelle Theobald is a 16-year-old Chinese-American student and goes to the international school in Beaverton, Oregon.
I was born with several physical and mental disabilities, including autism. And because of that, I always kind of struggled to fit in. I experienced depression, but actually I think I'm one of the lucky ones because I was helped by a lot of people, therapists and counselors.
Janelle wrote her essay about the added challenges for people with disabilities to get mental health resources. This was inspired from a personal experience of feeling marginalized at a young age.
There were signs from when I was young, like I have a language processing delay. So, in preschool, when my teachers asked me a question, they wouldn't be able to get an answer out of me until after they had gone to someone else and then come back to me. And I also have a low muscle tone and a congenital eye disease.
As Janelle looked for therapy resources, she learned about two groups of people who were erased from history in Portland, Oregon. The Lone Fir Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in the city. Janelle learned that its Block 14 section had a shameful past. She wrote about this in her essay.
Two groups of people are sheltered beneath the lot. The first group buried here is over 200 patients at the Oregon Hospital for the Insane, the first mental hospital in the state. Known for his humanity, the owner, Dr. Hawthorne, paid out of his own pocket for hundreds of burials, not only those with mental illness, but also those whose families were absent, or were living in poverty, physically disabled, or displayed behavior not accepted by society. Sometimes I wonder how many in my training class would be buried there if we had lived back then. The second group is Chinese workers who built much of the infrastructure in our area, often underpaid and in dangerous working conditions, resulting in many deaths. They were buried in Block 14 temporarily until their bodies could be shipped back to their home villages in China. Yet for many, especially women and children, Block 14 became their permanent resting place. Over time, the gravestones were destroyed and their stories were forgotten, as if their existence had no importance to the people who used the infrastructure these Chinese gave their lives to build. The city intended to sell the land of Block 14 for development, but multiple groups raised concerns, especially after human remains were discovered in 2005.
Janelle Theobald wanted recognition for early Chinese immigrants who came to America as laborers or small business owners. They were buried in graves without markers in a segregated part of the cemetery. She also wanted people with disabilities to be recognized, as well as those with mental illness who were once residents of what was called the Oregon Hospital for the Insane.
The city intended to sell the land of Block 14 for development, but multiple groups raised concerns, especially after human remains were discovered in 2005. Although plans were drawn up for a cultural heritage garden that would honor both groups in the 90s, The projects lacked the necessary funding to continue. Then, in 2019, Oregon Metro passed a Parks and Nature bond that would prioritize projects that promoted diversity. However, for a long time, the garden was not part of the discussion list, so the Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation reached out.
During lockdown, Janelle decided to take action by putting a marker in honor of the 2 groups buried at Lone Fir Cemetery. She started a letter-writing campaign.
I was the first one to answer the call. I wrote a sample letter to Metro and sent it to some social groups I'm in. Because of this, 25 other students also wrote their own letters. The letter campaign eventually led to Oregon Metro allocating $4 million to the project. There will always be groups of people that have it worse, but the world is getting better every day, thanks to the people who keep bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Although our country has become more and more inclusive, we all understand that there is no such thing as an ideal world. There will always be people who struggle with mental health. There will always be groups of people that have it worse. But the world is getting better every day, thanks to the people who keep bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice.
Janelle Theobald also remains vigilant in calling out bias against people with disabilities.
Nowadays, people are generally very understanding and accepting of those with physical disabilities. Yet many don't realize that mental illnesses are just as disabling as physical disabilities. Around 10 years ago, the city I live in had a committee that served people with disabilities, but it only served those with physical disabilities. Thinking that they had fulfilled all the ADA requirements, they eventually fell apart. This means that for a long time, we didn't have any committee to serve people with disabilities. Recently, I successfully lobbied my city to create the ADA Technical Advisory Committee, on whose board I now serve. I know I will do my part to help spread awareness and continue to fight for those that are marginalized or left behind.
Spreading awareness and continuing the fight. That's what many youth are doing, just as I will continue to advocate for legislation to prevent people convicted of hate crimes to own guns. And I will keep on writing creatively anytime I feel overwhelmed. Writing can free you. I know it helped me and the writers in the Ism Youth Files. A recent paper by the How Kids Learn Foundation laid out the benefits of civic engagement and activism for youth. It helps them make friends and promotes self-confidence. It also helps heal trauma, combat depression, and provides a sanctuary. Youth activism can prepare us for leadership roles while serving others and communities. And it fuels passion and purpose. On the next episode, tune in for added challenges when we hear from youth about what challenged them physically and emotionally during and after the pandemic. This is the Ism Youth Files. For more info about this project and the book Speaking Our Truths, visit mediarights.org. I'm Cara Chen.